Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 o'clock in Porto Novo. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. Senegalese government holds 4th edition of National Dialogue in Diamniadio with a focus on reforming the judiciary system.
Thank you for having responded favorably to our invitation to mark this National Day of Dialogue. This ceremony that brings us together fits in harmoniously with our old socio-cultural traditions of Diso.
Reactions trail IPOP's call to shut down public institutions and businesses in southeastern Nigeria to commemorate Biafra Day on May 30. Ivorian ruling party mates to affirm incumbent Alassane Ouattara as its presidential candidate for the 2025 election. And Gambian human rights activists intensify calls for the upholding of law on FGM.
As a human race, we have seen the impacts that this has on women. I have a sister that died from going through FGM, and that is not a lie.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is a more edit with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us, and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. But let's begin this afternoon here in Senegal with the kickoff of the 4th edition of the National Dialogue, chaired by President Bashir Diomaye Faye at the Abdou Diouf International Conference Center in Diamniadio. This edition of the dialogue will focus on the reform and modernization of justice. It will also serve as a framework for the various stakeholders to examine in depth the country's judicial system to improve it. Opening the event, President Diomaye Faye indicates that the national dialogue should lead to concrete results affecting various aspects of the judicial system.
Thank you for having responded favorably to our invitation to mark this National Day of Dialogue. This ceremony that brings us together fits in harmoniously with our old socio-cultural traditions of Diso that we carry on within our families and our communities. In keeping with this long-standing heritage, I have been keen to keep the symbolic date of 28th of May dedicated to national dialogue on the Republican calendar. In keeping with the spirit of my opening speech, my investiture speech, my message to the nation on Independence Day, and my guidelines to the Council of Ministers on 9th of April, I am reiterating today the high priority I give to consultation as a means of governing public affairs. Indeed, I remain convinced that the preventive virtue of dialogue in times of peace keeps the specters of tension at bay and promotes the consensual dynamic, thereby consolidating our democracy and ensuring the stability that is essential for economic and social development in the best interest of our nation.
Senegalese President Bashir Diomaye Faye speaking there. Let's head now to Burkina Faso, where Paul Sankara, the younger brother of former President Thomas Sankara, says the country is not prepared for elections at the moment. His comment comes after Burkina Faso's transitional period now extends to 5 years following a national consultation during which a new charter was signed by CSOs and traditional lawmakers in Ouagadougou on Saturday. Paul Sankara also denies his position in favoring security over democracy. He says, while the country has made some progress, it is not enough to hold elections at this time.
Today, we cannot organize elections in Burkina Faso, that's for sure, unless we do it in just geographical part of the Burkina, but not the whole Burkina Faso. But let's have a civil society movement, militaries, lawyers, political parties, etc., etc. What can we do? This is the reality. Such and such places like the western part of Burkina Faso, the northern part and the east, they have made some success, but it's not still quite before 2015, year of the beginning of terrorist attacks. We have made a progress, but it's still not enough to organize elections. So I'm not opposing democracy and security issues. Years of revolution, it's not just quote unquote the folkloric aspect. How can I say that? Not in the form, but the content. The main difference is that before getting into power, many Thomas worked with the trade union, the youth, political party, even if when he was in training in different countries, the little time that he used to have, nights, weekends with those who were in France studying, finishing their PhD. And so it's a background experience, political consciousness, a work done before getting into power in August 4th, 1983.
Paul Sankara, the younger brother of Burkina Faso's former president, Thomas Sankara. In Nigeria, residents of the southeastern region have refused to comply with the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB's call to shut down public institutions and businesses across the geopolitical zone in order to commemorate Biafra Day on May 30, 2024. In this report by WDL's Usman Umara, daily activities are continuing uninterrupted in the capital of the states in the region.
In the past, the armed wing of IPOB would enforce a total shutdown every May 30, prompting businesses and transporters to withdraw their services, bringing all activities to a halt. However, the IPOB's leader, Nnamdi Kanu, currently incarcerated and the group significantly degraded by the security agencies, residents are adamant about disrupting business activities on May 30th this year.
Just relocated from Jos, and from where I was before, all these things, there's nothing like shutdown whenever anything is going on. So it's somehow when we came back, that's when we start experiencing all this shutdown. So me, I don't really think it's wise.
My advice is that they should not shut down everything. We should continue until the day the time comes.
Social activist Godsent Chulos has denounced the May 30th observance as unconstitutional, urging the government to protect the rights of innocent citizens and prevent any infringement on their freedoms.
The governors of the Southeast need to sit down and call the organizers of this restriction of movement on the May 30th to understand the economic implication and also the political implication. Because one, when you restrict movement, it's also possible that the region will miss billions of naira that would have been accrued as a tax for just that single day in the Southeast. So what the governments of the Southeast should do is to call them into their work and talk to them to understand the economic implication and then the security implication.
On May 30th, 2024, the 56th anniversary of Biafra's Declaration of Independence will be marked. In 1967, Lieutenant Colonel Odumegu Ojukwu led the predominantly Igbo region in a bid for independence from Nigeria amid escalating ethnic tensions and military coups. This bold move triggered a devastating civil war, claiming the lives of approximately 1 million civilians and ultimately ending in their defeat in 1970. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Côte d'Ivoire, the ruling party, the Rally of Youths for Democracy and Peace, RHDP, on Monday organized a major meeting of parties' executives at the Hotel Ivoire Conference Center at Abidjan. The meeting was essentially devoted to the general mobilization of all party bodies in preparation for the 2025 presidential election. It was an opportunity for the RHDP to affirm that President Alassane Ouattara is the obvious candidate for the 2025 election. WDL's Francis Boniface has the rest of the story.
The meeting, which aims to mobilize the various party bodies to prepare for the 2025 presidential election, is also to work towards ensuring victory for its candidates during the next polls, the ruling party has said. Gilbert Kone-Kafana is the chairman of the RHDP board.
We all agree that what is at stake is the resounding victory of the RODP, the victory of our champion, our mentor, our natural candidate, His Excellency Mr. Alassane Ouattara, in the 2025 presidential election. That's why we are calling for mobilization. We are calling for it now. Today is 16 months after the presidential election.
The RHDP intends to mobilize for the revision process for the electoral roll and for the special operation to issue identity documentations. The party wants to register its voters on the electoral roll and give them the cards they need to vote. Instructions have been given to the various bases in the interior of the country to mobilize for the success of these two important events in preparation for the 2025 presidential election. In the moment, President Alassane Ouattara has not yet officially declared his candidacy for the next election. Opponents Laurent Gbagbo of the PPSCI, Pascal Afingwesan of the FPI, Tijan Cham of the PDCI, and Charles Blake Gude of the COJEP are already positioning themselves for the 2025 polls.
Francis Boniface filed that report. Let's stick it down to Liberia because the United Nations Development Programme has renewed its commitment at supporting Liberia's readiness for the carbon market globally, especially helping the country to access its carbon and climate financing program. Despite its limited contribution to global emissions, Liberia is one of those least developed countries, LDCs, that continue to bear the brunt of the climate crisis, hence the UNDP's assistance. WDL's Ellington Popper has a report.
UNDP resident representative to Liberia, Louis Cookman, said his institution's intervention is due to a request from the Liberian Authority in 2022 to help expand the country's fiscal space in the carbon market. He said the UNDP recognizes Liberia's commitment to ensuring the conservation of its forests, as well as the government's desire to leverage its forest assets for accessing investment capital and financial resources that will catalyze its national development.
Based on this request, UNDP accepted to support the country in developing a carbon readiness roadmap that will help Liberia achieve the twin objectives of reducing emissions from the forest loss, sustainable management and protection of forests, and thus contributing to the climate action, while at the same time enabling access to resource-based carbon finance to expand Liberia's fiscal space and accelerate inclusive and sustainable development.
Remarking on behalf of Liberia, the executive director of the Environmental Protection Agency, Emmanuel Yakpaolo, assured the partners that the government will do all it can to ensure that the fight against forest carbon climate change is successful.
If this approach is taken to the new resource we call carbon market, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. There shouldn't be too much of a problem. Because if the carbon, and rightfully so, is a forest resource, it is the FDS that manage that. So in terms of what they do with that, we develop a regulation and make sure if one is extracting carbon or credit thereof is fitting within the environmental laws of Liberia and Liberia's commitment to international agreement. The EPA played that role.
As one of the remaining countries in West Africa harboring high carbon stocks, Liberia has vowed to ensure that forests are sustainably managed and maintained into the future. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Darlington Popper in Monrovia.
You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of the top stories. Senegalese government holds 4th edition of National Dialogue in Diamniadio with a focus on reforming the judiciary system. Reactions trail IPOP's call to shut down public institutions and businesses in southeastern Nigeria to commemorate Biafra Day on May 30. Ivorian ruling party admits to affirm incumbent Alassane Ouattara as its presidential candidate for the 2025 election. And still ahead, Gambian human rights activists intensify calls for the upholding of law on FGM. We do have the newspaper review, a guest interview, and sport news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Don't forget, we are streaming live on wadr.org, Facebook, and YouTube. In the Gambia, civil society organizations and gender activists have presented their position papers before the Gambia National Assembly's Health Committee, urging lawmakers to uphold the anti-FGM law in the country. Advocates highlighted the law's critical role in protecting girls and women from the harmful practice of female genital mutilation. Sankli Janko has more details in this report.
In a monumental push for women's rights and health, civil society organizations and gender activists continue to present position papers before the National Assembly Health Committee, urging lawmakers to uphold the anti-FGM law in the Gambia. Jahad Dukre is a survivor and a renowned gender activist who presented a paper on behalf of her foundation, Same Hand for Girls.
As a human race, we have seen the impacts that this has on women. I have a sister that died from going through FGM, and that is not a lie. When she was subjected to FGM, when she was 1 week old, she bled. And this is the reality for many people. And we're not saying that everyone that goes through FGM dies, because I went through FGM and I'm sitting here.
The Gambia Committee on Traditional Practice also presented a paper before the Health Committee of the Assembly. The advocacy group against harmful practices against women and children was led by former Gambian Vice President president and a renowned gender advocate, Dr. Aisha Toure.
This submission seeks to call for maintaining the law protecting women and girls from female genital mutilation and to contribute to informed decision-making and promote the protection of human rights, gender equality, and the well-being of all citizens, particularly women and girls in the Gambia.
Meanwhile, the National Human Rights Commission, just like all others, also advocates for the Assembly to uphold the law criminalizing FGM. Emmanuel Juf is the chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission of the Gambia.
The Women's Amendment Act of 2015, which has been in operation since 2015, and this is what is sought to be repealed. I think this is where we are. And as an institution, we have said it is a dangerous route to take.
The Health Committee's deliberations continue, with advocates hopeful that their testimonies will lead to strengthening protections for all Gambian women and girls. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I'm Sankula Jenke reporting from Banjul.
Well, from the Gambia to Ghana, where former President John Mahama is pleading with multinational companies not to exit the Ghanaian market. His appeal comes at the back of the country's worsening economic situation, which has already seen some foreign companies announce their exits due to the unbearable conditions. HRTC explains further in this report.
John Mahama, who is also the leader of the largest opposition political party in Ghana, was speaking at the 8th Ghana CEO Summit in Accra when he made the call. The National Democratic Congress flag bearer indicated that the departure of multinational companies from Ghana will obviously impact negatively on job creation, tax revenue to the state, and ultimately economic growth. The economic environment in Ghana spanning 2022 to date has compelled many multinational companies to relocate all or parts of their businesses to other countries. The latest to quit its operations in Ghana is a food delivery giant in Africa, Glovo. The Spanish firm announced that it will be exiting the Ghanaian market on May 10, 2024, citing profitability challenges and a reassessment of investment priorities. Addressing the summit, Mahama explained that amid all the companies leaving, Ghana's public debts have hit a staggering 658.6 billion Ghana cedis, about $47.2 million US. He appealed to the international business community not to leave the country since there is still hope for a brighter business future.
Game, Glovo, Nivea, Big Pen, Dark and Lovely have all shut down. Unilever has relocated its tea production to Nigeria, and amid all this, our public debts now hit a staggering 658.6 billion Ghana cedis. But we cannot despair over the poor quality of governance that has served us in the last 7.5 years. I wish to use this opportunity to appeal to you, captains of industry and the investor community, to tarry a bit more. Please don't leave our country. It is said that the darkest hour is before the dawn.
He further promised to create a conducive environment for companies to run their businesses should the NDC win the 2024 poll. The former president also gave assurances to the investor community that his new presidential administration will create a conducive environment for businesses to thrive. John Mahama is seeking to return to the presidency to complete his constitutionally mandated second 4-year term as president of Ghana.
HRTC reporting there.
This is the Newspaper Review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the Newspaper Review.
The Newspaper Review.
Well, we head back now to Monrovia as we join Danington Popa for the Newspaper Review.
For today's edition of Press Review, we have the Inquirer newspaper, the Heritage newspaper, and the Independent newspaper. So we begin the review process with the Inquirer newspaper. Ingratitude or entitlement as stranded Liberian returnees make demands. Report emanating from Banga City, Bon County says that the government of Liberia and stranded Liberians from the Bujumbura refugee camp in Ghana are currently embroidered in the tussle over the latter's locality for resettlement upon arrival in Liberia. Prior to their arrival, it was planned by the government through the Liberia Refugee Repatriation and Resettlement Commission that the returnees who have settled in Bon County, after which they can be linked up with their family members across the country. But to the dismay of the government and residents of Bon, the returning refugees upon their return to Liberia begin raising concerns over their stay in the county, as some of them are now demanding that the government ensure a home in Monrovia for their stay. They argue that the structure erected for them by the government in Bon County is not conducive and lacks several facilities. As such, they are now faced with challenges. Finding a stable locality for their resettlement. We will leave it right there, and we also understand that the 770 of them are all demanding that they be brought to Monrovia in the capital and resettle here. And so also on the front page of the Inquirer newspaper, HOS establishes standing committee on watch that Water, Sanitation and Hygiene Commission. UP Alliance at loggerheads for government's procured earth-moving equipment. On the back page of the Inquirer newspaper, bloggery on Capitol Hill scares legislators. Female journalists benefit from CIMES MFWA Digital Skills Program. From the Inquirer newspaper, the Heritage newspaper is now our next stop for today's edition of Press Review. Bapolu Senator's Office bloggeras. We will leave it right there. Police chief vows to restore public trust. On the back page of the Heritage newspaper, former VP Howard calls on women to unite in fighting sexual gender-based violence. Move expels top officials for gross violation. RRRC bus describes as successful first phase of the repatriation program. From the Heritage newspaper, the Independent newspaper is now our last stop for today's edition of Press Review. 50 rice continues coming. At long last, 1,080 metric tons arrive soon. Criminals invade the Senate, loot several offices. On the back page of the Independent newspaper, we are asked return to presidency. Eugene Nangbe reveals. On that note, thank you so much for following, and bye-bye.
Many thanks, Darlington Popper there with a newspaper review.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
We'll take you to Nigeria in this segment as a guest. Constitutional lawyer Barrister Fred Nzako takes a look at the objection by the residents of the southeastern region of the country to the call by the proscribed indigenous people of Biafra IPOBs to shut down public institutions and businesses across the geopolitical zone in order to commemorate Biafra Day on May 30, 2024. Barrister Fred takes a look at the reasons and why the call for cessation across Nigeria seems to be growing.
That of May 30 is an anniversary, usually declared by IPOB on a yearly basis in remembrance of the memory of lost ones of the Southeast, people who lost their lives during the Nigeria-Biafra War of 1967 to 1970. The former government of Anambra State made a big issue out of it, and the government was not alone. Other governments of the Southeast were unanimous in the fact that the memory of the lost ones must always be remembered, at least that once a year. Some people who are saying they will not agree are usually people who have little or no positive sentiment towards IPOB. And the problem is not the declaration itself, but the organ or authority that did the declaration. Because when such declaration was done by the government, people respected it, and then it was a form fair. But now that it's being declared by IPOB, some people are skeptical about the fallout.
Well, Barrister, is there a part in the Constitution of Nigeria that backs this call for independence in the event of some of the elements and factors you've just mentioned?
Well, there is no definite part of Nigerian Constitution that says so, but Nigeria is a signatory to other international conventions, UN conventions, UN Charter, and African Charter on Human Rights that lend credence to the fact that people should be free to live their lives the way and manner they deem so. And something that is close to it is in section 35 to section 45 of our Constitution, which talks about the various rights ascribed to a Nigerian citizen. And even though it is not specifically stated that right to self-determination should be there, but right to freedom of expression, freedom of choice, freedom of movement, and all other freedoms that are associated with nature and which every human being must enjoy. They are all stipulated in the Nigerian Constitution. And then the people who are agitating have extended such rights to also accommodate this right to self-determination as enshrined in the UN Charter, African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And because there are templates around the world where people have determined who they will be and where they will belong. The recent one being that of Brexit. You had that in Sudan, where the South Sudanese determined where they will be part of Sudan and all that. You have that between Ethiopia and Eritrea. You have that even in Spain and the Catalan island. So there are examples all around the world whereby the right to self-determination was recognized and respected. And that is why these people are now feeling that if Nigeria political landscape does not offer them justice, equity, and fairness, that it is better for them to determine their fate, their rights, and determine who they will be.
Right, so Fred Nzako is a constitutional lawyer. And here is Sankli Danko with Sport News.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The Nigeria Football Federation, NFF, has released a refutal that players and officials of the national team are being owed of money released to the team before the last Africa Cup of Nations in Cote d'Ivoire, according to local media reports. The NFF, in an official statement, says the presidency had late last year, and following a process supported and personally followed through by the Minister of Sports, John Owonu-Eno, released the monies to the NFF for the payment of outstanding bonuses and allowances of players and officials of the various national football teams. The NFF issued the statement after a publication on a local newspaper that the Federation is owing players allowances. However, the Federation dismissed the claims while describing the report as tissues of lies and challenged the writer to come forward with evidence of his claims. Meanwhile, Nigerian national football team, the Super Eagles head coach Finidi George, has unveiled a 25-man squad for the 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifiers against South Africa and Benin. The former Super Eagles player opted for a more attacking team, which includes more than 3 strikers. That's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Kamal Dujuf for the technical assistance. Let's keep the conversation coming on all of our platforms: X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, at WDL News. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 1